Welcome to the Hamumu Halloween Home Horror Hoedown, the podcast where we watch scary movies so you don't have to.
From award-winning to completely unknown, we take them all way too seriously.
I'm your host, Mike Hummel.
And I'm your host, Solange Hummel.
Now, warning, we use a ghoulish number of spoilers, so watch the movies first.
Second warning, we don't know anything about anything, so don't take us seriously as we take these movies seriously.
Here's a fun experiment.
Yes?
Let's watch a movie,
Okay.
not take any notes,
Oh,
not
no.
even know in advance that we're going to be covering it on our podcast,
Oh, you've lost me.
then wait 2 days, 3 days,
Yep.
and then do a podcast about it.
This is not gonna go well.
I think we should try it.
Okay.
Okay, so we did all the steps except the last one.
Okay, what movie did we watch?
You should remember.
It's been several days. I don't remember anything.
Leave the World Behind from 2023, starring Julia Roberts and Ethan Hawke as one couple, and Mahershala Ali and Mihala, who was in our previous movie, Bodies, 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 not as a couple, father and daughter.
Yeah. I remember this movie.
Do you?
I remember some things about this movie. What I remember about this movie is that Ethan Hawke and Julia Roberts are this, like, wealthy white couple who have, high-powered jobs, and they take their two kids on vacation, spur of the moment.
Very spur of the moment.
To this, like, VRBO style thing where they rent somebody's house and they're on the beach and they're hanging out. And then things start happening in the world.
Everything gets weird.
Which are weird. And then Mihala and Mahershala Ali show up and they're like, this is our house. We need to stay here. Things got weird and we don't have anywhere to go. You need to let us in. We'll still let you stay here. And it's all weird from that point because they're like trying to figure out who's up to what.
Yeah, that's definitely an element, but there's also the element of what's up with what around here.
Sure, because like phones don't work, the TV's not working, which sends the daughter of the one couple into a straight up spiral because she can't watch the finale of Friends.
Yeah, which this is set in the present. She's watching it on
Yes.
YouTube or whatever.
Yes. But like they cannot communicate with the outside world. And all they get a little bit of information from this dad and his daughter who show up, but they aren't sure that information is trustworthy.
Yes, there's some question about who is this guy and did they even drive here, which is a weird concern to have.
It very much addresses the like sublimated racial tensions that percolate to the surface very quickly when people are in stressful situations.
Mm-hmm. Especially when they're Julia Roberts.
She's pretty Karen in this movie.
Pretty Karen.
Pretty Karen.
Remember that one? Big mistake.
You tried to take your VRBO home back while I'm still renting it. Big mistake. I need to talk to the company.
Mm-hmm. So weird things happen, starting with an oil tanker just starts coming at the beach they're hanging out on, and they're like, oh, isn't that funny? It's getting closer. And then after a while, they're like, oh, it's really getting closer, and everybody starts running, and indeed, it crashes on the beach. Very exciting.
Turns out it is one of many tankers and boats that are beaching themselves along the coastline.
Like whales.
Like whales.
They're just,
it was very much
they're
like a whale.
fed up.
I stand behind that word choice.
It's fair.
Yeah, that's a thing that happens. Now, later we also find out that another thing that's happening is that planes are falling out of the sky.
They are indeed.
What's weird to me, well, there was a lot that was weird to me about the whole plane thing.
Yeah.
But when I'm thinking about it, why did the tanker thing happen so much sooner than the plane thing? Like, wouldn't a plane fall out of the sky a lot faster than a tanker would run up on the beach?
It did take the tanker a while. But, I mean, maybe, they were where they were. There was a tanker there. There were no planes there. And then later a plane got there.
I'm just saying, like, let's say everything, I mean, maybe it didn't all happen at once. We never do find out what's happening out in the world, because this is very much one of those movies where it takes place in a very specific bubble and you don't really know what's happening outside.
And that's actually kind of the premise, at least if you believe the theories being presented by the characters. They're like, this is a thing where we are not allowed to know what's going on outside, and that's the problem.
So, but what I'm saying is, like, if it just happened where the satellites cut out and that impacted planes and boats, it would have impacted planes faster than boats. It wouldn't have been like a boat ran aground one day and then the next day planes start crashing.
Yeah, I can see that is a big problem if we are to accept the theory, because it was the next day, right?
It was very much the next day.
Yeah, it wasn't the first plane, but anyway, forget previous planes, doesn't matter. A plane crashed the next day, which means that somebody took off in that plane, that at some airport, they were like, oh, flight 17, everybody get on. We're going to fly, from Boston to New York. And so things were normal in Boston or wherever.
I feel like this is a plot hole. I feel like this is not, they didn't think that through in terms of like, what's really going on? They were just like, here's an exciting scene where they don't know what's happening with the boat, and then the boat happens. And then later, here's another exciting scene where he's like, why is my friend's house all destroyed? And then he walks to the beach and he's like, oh my gosh, a plane is crashing. And then he suddenly notices that the entire beach is littered with planes that have crashed there.
Yeah, there are things in this movie that are so fantastical and surreal that it's wrong. Like, it puts this movie into kind of a fantasy, allegorical kind of territory. But I was thinking earlier that that's not okay. You're not allowed to do that.
Oh, that's quite a statement given what I'm about to say about that.
You're not allowed to do that unless you make it more clear. Like, if your movie looks like reality and then somebody doesn't notice an entire beach full of planes parts all over it, that's wrong. Whereas if your movie was, introduced with bouncing pink unicorns and then someone didn't notice a beach full of plane parts, okay, that's clearly something weird's going on. They don't set up your expectations properly.
I see what you're saying. And within the Western style of storytelling, I would say yes, that is accurate. I feel like they were mixing styles in a way that we're not used to. However, with my very limited experience of stories from a more African style of storytelling, that is something I have come to expect from stories with that like African background.
Interesting premise.
And the reason I say that about this movie, I'm not saying that this movie is African. Like I don't know anything about who wrote this or whatever.
Now I'm curious. I'm clicking on, he's from Washington, and the writer-director is from Hoboken.
So I'm not saying this is a story from Africa. I'm saying this story feels like it was influenced by other types of storytelling beyond the traditional Western storytelling, which I think is becoming more common because we have started exploring and like even acknowledging the fact in America, we have started to acknowledge the fact that there are ways of putting together a story that are not all exactly the same as what we do here in the United States.
Indeed.
And what's funny is we saw that Barack and Michelle Obama are executive producers of this movie. And some of the books that I have read where I've seen that more like, you said it well, I think you said like allegorical or something. Like that kind of more like fantasy in the real world kind of storytelling are ones that I got off of Barack Obama's reading list one year, and they were stories by African authors.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is an interesting angle. The fact that Barack and Michelle Obama executive produced this, which is we see in the opening credits, put a whole twist in the entire movie from that moment where I'm like, so what is it? What put them on this? And I have some thoughts on that probably for later, which go into what I think this movie is about, because that's how I feel. Like if Barack and Michelle executive produced a movie, it's because it's about something that they want to put out in the world.
These are smart people who make smart decisions and are very intentional about what they put their name on.
Yeah, they're not the kind of people who'd be like, ooh, I'm going to make a cool horror movie.
Right? I had that same thought. I saw their names and I was like, oh, this movie is going to be a whole thing that I didn't even realize it was going to be.
Yeah.
Like, after watching the trailer, I was intrigued by the premise as like a thriller. Mm-hmm. And then I saw their names and I was like, oh, damn. What's going to happen? What's happening?
Indeed.
Okay, so tell me, I think rather than go into the whole storyline of this movie, I think we should talk about
to do that.
What do you think it means and why do you think they put their name on it?
Well, I had a whole thought process this morning in the shower because I was like, initially, there's definitely a part of this movie that is about community and building connections and how it's, better to do that than silo ourselves off and be separate. That's something this movie is saying. And, because part of the movie is about these people are being cut off from the world and isn't that terrible? Like, we all should be connected.
And they have to rely on each other, whether they want to or not, whether they feel like they should trust each other or not. And there is a lack of trust from both directions, specifically from the two women in the movie.
Yeah.
They rubbed each other the wrong way from the very beginning. And I think a lot of that, like, there was a lot of interesting, like, cultural and racial stuff that went into that rubbing each other the wrong way piece.
Yeah. That was well done. And it's a thing like that. That's something the movie talks about, but I'm like, is that the thing that they wanted to do with this movie? That seems weird to me. And, why would you tell this story? Like the movie Crash is that kind of movie where it's all about people of different races and race relations, and it's very heavy-handed, ridiculous.
Right. So what else do you think? What was your shower thought?
Here's what's interesting. This movie came out in 2023, and it is literally about a type of warfare, basically an idea of a way you could attack a country, which doesn't really add up if you ask me. But let's say the theory is that they go in and somehow knock out all of your communications infrastructure instantly, like cyber attacks, which is what they were doing here. And you confuse them about who's attacking them.
And then you let them destroy themselves.
Yeah, because they're all paranoid and they can't communicate. Mm-hmm. Which, that doesn't add up in a real world scenario to me. I think it would not be like that. But you know what is like that? Disinformation, which is what this movie is strongly about. Mm-hmm. I think that's what they're trying to talk about here. They're trying to say, look, people, disinformation is happening, and you have to think about where you're getting information and who you're getting it from and what you can trust. And I think that's because of what we went through in 2016 and 2020 and how that's continuing, and Russia continues to hack us and hack our people. I think they wanted to put out a horror story that was the disinformation. Mm-hmm. I think that's what it was.
I think that is a big part of it. I would agree with that. I also think, though, that the horror of not being able to trust and connect with the people around you in times of crisis is a huge thing. I think that is something that, specifically, now, it feels funny to be talking about this like this is a movie that just Barack and Michelle Obama made, right? But,
yeah. But the question is, why did they choose to produce it?
Right. I think that having been president and having been privy to all of the things that he is privy to as president, that the rest of us will never truly understand.
Like the official plan he found for conducting warfare in this way.
I think that he has a unique perspective on what it means to not be able to rely. Like he can see the realities of, like, these are some of the things that could happen to us that most people in our country just blithely ignore, right?
Yeah.
We have the privilege of ignorance and bliss in this sense. And he's like, there are a number of things that could happen. And if the people of this country turn on each other rather than relying on each other in those moments of crises, then that's it. We're done. That's the end of us. And I think that is I think that is also horrific. And then a third piece of it is the horror of, we have been experiencing cyber attacks in this country. We have been seeing over the past several years a multitude of times when institutions that we think of, or systems that we think of, that we don't even think of, systems that we rely on every day without thinking, have been hacked in some way by some nefarious force. Mm-hmm. Whether that's a chaos demon hacker trying to show, like, look what could happen, with no like real bad intent, but like doing something to show what could happen, or outside political forces trying to, sow disinformation and stuff.
Yeah.
But we've seen our airlines get hacked. We've seen banks get hacked. We've seen medical things get hacked.
Oh, that's happening.
All of those things are happening. And then we continue to consolidate power and control into fewer and fewer hands. And so now, like, Elon Musk owns all the satellites.
Yeah.
He
doesn't even have to get hacked. He just shuts them down if he doesn't like you.
He's already been hacked.
Yeah, he's mentally hacked.
That man's brain has been hacked.
Yeah.
And so, like, never mind the fact that X is surely a Swiss cheese of
he fired all the security people.
Security holes. But, like, it wouldn't even need to have security holes because they've also psychologically hacked the guy who's at the controls. Like, yeah. I think all of those things together, you take them all together and you're like, ugh. I felt very precarious at the end of this movie.
Sure. I think you have touched on something that maybe is even a more obvious reason why they would support this. It's that kind of cheesy thing of just, why don't we all get along?
The Obamas of being cheesy?
Yes, because they come from an older time when it was possible for people to get along. And they're like, stop the division. We are in grave danger if we can't rely on each other. We need to trust each other, whatever our difference is. That kind of thing.
I mean, I think that is a thing that they both definitely advocated for and championed. This idea of, Michelle Obama known for, when they go low, we go high, right? Like, that is definitely a thing that they have supported and championed for a very long time. Now, it's interesting to say that now, a few weeks, a month, I don't remember when the Democratic National Convention happened, but like maybe 2 or 3 weeks after Michelle Obama gives this speech at the DNC about
She's
how,
like, never mind,
we're done with that strategy. Like,
now we're going to cyber attack them.
There's a level of low where we stop going high.
Yeah.
And then, like, just having just watched the debate between Trump and Harris last night, Harris is also like, we're done going high. And she's not going low, but she's definitely not tolerating the BS the way it has been in the past.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting to watch this movie within the context of the current political climate, which is chaos, and which, like, the idea that this sort of thing could happen, this movie was actually scary to me.
Yeah, I think
in a way that a lot of horror movies are not.
This was one of the more unsettling movies we've seen. And it just, like, had me on edge most of the time because it did a really good job of, here's a weird thing happening, here's another weird thing happening, here's another one. What ties all these together? Why are these happening? And you have to try to figure it out. And that's very fun. I like a mystery. And it always felt very weird. And how could that possibly be? And it did all tie together, except I have issues with all the animals being crazy. I know half of what happened 2/3 of what happened all comes down to this microwave weapon, that it uses very loud noise to heat up the air, basically, and just mess you up. And that explains basically everything. It's like that causes you to have like radiation poisoning type symptoms. It causes the boats to screw up, although I think that was more about hacking. It causes the animals to freak out and, get messed up about what they're doing. And it felt like a movie where the only real answer could be aliens. But instead, it was just this beam that somehow travels whatever distance, because we have no idea where it came from. But it was so loud that they couldn't stand to hear it, and their windows were shattering.
I think that that's more of that kind of surreal storytelling choice, where the idea of this is so big. Like, this is Stephen King big, right?
Yeah,
like,
it's a pretty Stephen King-y.
It's a premise where, like, to fully explore what's going on and to really delve into, like, what would happen with the animals and what would happen with the different groups of people in rural and city, and, you would end up with a Stephen King, the Stand-length novel, right? And instead of doing that, and this still was a long movie.
It was quite long. 2 hours and 18 minutes.
But instead of, like, delving into all the little details of everything, they really were like, animals got weirded out, and here's one example, and we're going to ignore all the other animals.
Except that flamingos showed up in their pool.
Right. Super CGI flamingos.
Yeah.
There was not a real feather about any of those birds.
No.
But, like, they're like, we're going to show you what happens with the deer, and the deer are acting super weird, and then we're just going to let you extrapolate that to the rest of it. And that was sort of how it was. It was like, we're showing you this one little microcosm of, like, these two families coming together and what they're facing, and we're going to let you extrapolate what's happening in all the other houses and all the rest of the world.
And I like that kind of story where, don't worry about that. Let's see it as it affects these people very personally. That's a better story than the global thing where you have, like, military high command in the bunkers going, what are we gonna do? And sending out orders. Like, that's not interesting.
I don't know. I still think The Stand is one of the best books I've ever read.
The Stand is mostly not that, though. It destroys all of that and just leaves you with people individually crossing the country.
Well, okay, so the thing about it is that, like, Stephen King does that. He tells this story, but he tells all of the stories. Like, he's like, here, I'm going to tell you about this family, and then we're going to, go to the other side of town, and I'm going to tell you about this other family, and then we're going to go over here to this other city entirely and tell you about a couple families there. Like, he puts the story together by bringing all the different people and telling the individual stories that weave into the whole thing. Whereas this was just one of them.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I thought it was very interesting. And I was okay with not getting too hung up on the details. The plane thing, I didn't notice all of these plane parts. That was
crazy.
Was wild to me. It
was this scene where he walks out onto the beach. He sees a watch in the sand, and he's like, what's that watch doing there? So he's looking out from land towards the ocean. And he walks out.
We're doing it too.
Yeah.
We see a spread of beach that's completely empty except for this watch.
He goes, ooh, a watch, because apparently he really wanted a watch. Pulls it out of the sand, and lo and behold, it's attached to an arm that is severed from a body.
And then you blink, and then suddenly there's a whole body there. Not like the whole thing was buried under the sand so that only the watch was out, and then the next moment there's a whole body on the beach.
I think that body wasn't under the sand. I think it was just out of our view. I think he was tunnel visioned
because
in.
the arm wasn't attached.
Yeah, he was just tunnel visioned in on this watch. He's like, gotta have a watch.
Well, okay, I think you're hitting on something there, though, because I think if I want to give this the benefit of the doubt, it could be illustrating, like, the panic brain that that you get in a situation like this where you don't understand what's going on and your brain has too much coming in and it's like filtering things out. And so, like, he's already trying to think about all of the things that have happened. He's worried about his wife. He's worried about his daughter. He's worried about what happened to his friend's house, which, like, is completely destroyed and he doesn't know why.
Yeah, and neither do we.
So, like, I think he does hyper-focus in on this one thing that he sees on the beach. And he's like, that's out of place. What's going on here? And it's not until he like touches it and sees the arm, and then suddenly his brain is like, oh crap, look at all of this.
Including directly in front of me in the water where I had to walk like 50 feet straight towards this. There's a chunk of plane sitting in the water.
That I completely missed.
The entire intro of Lost is in front of me, and I had no idea.
It's weird. It's weird.
It's very weird. And then another plane comes flying out of the sky and almost hits him.
But I think, I think it's just, there's this surrealness of it, you know? Mm-hmm. And the propaganda plane that the other guy experiences.
Insane.
That's dumping a bazillion pamphlets over like one, square yard, basically. Like it's like right on his head, basically.
Yeah, it's this. He says it's a drone. I didn't even realize that. So it's small enough that
I thought it was a plane.
It's a drone, and it's like, say it's light plane sized, and it's just a flood of these pamphlets as it drives down or flies down the road, and it couldn't have possibly continued that for more than 100 feet. Mm-mm. And then what? They're like, well, there's a lot of pamphlets there. It was an intern at the evil empire.
Who was like, oh, I'm supposed to distribute all these?
Yeah.
Boom. Done.
Yep, I got it done. I delivered every single one to America, like you said.
Yeah, there were things. But overall, I think that contributed to like the confusion and the weirdness of it rather than detracting.
I think it was intended to.
Yeah.
And I think it was overboard. I think they took away reality in order to give us as much of that as they could get.
But I think that was very intentional. And I think it was this is how we tell this story.
Yeah.
Choice.
But you mentioned he was very concerned about his wife. That makes me say, so, okay, this plane that we see crashes a day too late, right? Like the day after this whole stuff starts. What if his wife was flying from some distant country? What if that's a plane from a distant country comes in and gets into the radius of badness and then crashes? See?
Okay, I mean, that could be, but you would think they would ground everybody when they're like, planes along the East Coast are all crashing.
Think.
Like, maybe we shouldn't send planes there anymore.
Yeah, the pilot was just listening to his music.
Yeah. That plane that crashed, though, was not an overseas plane. Like, the plane that crashed on him was like a commuter-sized plane, I thought.
It was definitely some kind of jet, so it wasn't like a little prop plane.
But it was like a Colleen to DFW plane, not a Austin to France plane.
Well, then I don't understand how it tore up 700 square miles of beach while it was hitting him.
Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, so...
No, it hit the ocean and created like a tidal wave that tsunamied in and smashed through the windows of the house he ran into and got him soaking wet so that everyone could comment on how he was wet.
Fortunately, though, he hid behind the door.
Not the windows,
so the
door.
windows were completely destroyed, but the door was fine.
Yeah. I mean, the plane probably knocked and was like, land plane, sir.
That's not even my generation of SNL, and it's
your
still
favorite.
One of my favorite SNL.
It's your favorite, and that's why I did it.
Love it. Candygram, ma'am.
So, Lee.
Yes.
I want to know, because I feel like the last moment of a movie, the big finale of a movie.
I was just going to say, we have to talk about the kids.
That's where you get you twist the knife, and you're like, boom! That really hits the point home.
I think it was a very specific knife twist.
What was the point?
Okay, this girl, she's like 13. She is obsessed with the show Friends.
Super obsessed.
And her brother asks her, like, why do you care so much about them? And she's like, they, give me hope, whatever. Like, they are the relationship that she relies on.
Yeah.
Which, through the whole movie, I'm sort of sad for her because, clearly she does not have a connection with her parents and her brother. Her brother, a little bit better, it seems. But, nobody understands her. She's not feeling super connected to them. She tells her brother, they are what I care about.
Yeah.
And he's like, maybe you should care about something else. Because he's older. He's 16, 17. creeper dude.
Yeah.
But I think that line where he says, maybe you should care about something else is like really important. But then also the fact that he delivers it and then immediately rolls over and pulls the covers over his head and is like, but that's not me. Like, I'm not going to connect with you. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that he's old enough and of a different enough generation growing up that he can be like, it's not cool that your only connections are these TV people, but he's not different enough that he can be like, here's what you should do instead.
Yeah.
Because he's kind of the same. Like, his only connections were how he viewed the world through his camera. Like, he didn't interact with this girl, this daughter that came, the daughter that belonged to the house. He just, recorded her on his phone and then watched that. Like, it was weird. Mm-hmm. So I think that at the end, the end, she's like, I'm not waiting anymore. She quotes West Wing, which is brilliant. I loved that. She's like, I'm not waiting for help anymore. I'm going to go, like, take care of myself. She just ups and leaves. She doesn't interact with her family, doesn't tell them what she's doing. She just leaves. She goes to the neighbor house where she eats all the junk food.
So much.
And she discovers they're like fully stocked bunker. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh man, like this is the thing. Like these people are all going to live. This is Fallout.
Yeah, they found one of the vaults.
They're going to get into the vault, and then years later, they're going to, it's going to be great.
Was it great in Fallout?
No, it was terrible in Fallout. I'm just saying, this is their salvation. In this story, the neighbors aren't there. They don't even have to fight for the bunker. Mm-mm. It's just they're fully stocked. They can go. They can be safe from the radiation. They have all the food. They have all the things. Mm-hmm. She sees the wall of DVDs.
And Buffy was there.
There were a lot of things. I was like, maybe we need to start collecting DVDs for the end times.
We have so many.
And we need to not get rid of that DVD player that we have.
Yeah.
Anyway, she sees the wall of DVDs. She sees the Friends DVD. She pops it in. The TV system is working because it's not connected to the world. She turns it on and she starts watching the finale of Friends. Mm-hmm. And to me, that was, if we don't fix the connections that we have with this young generation, which we're all saying is going to save us, if we don't fix that connection, they're not going to save us because they're not going to know how, and they're not going to know that they should.
Or maybe they're going to take the bunker for themselves and leave us out of it.
Well, they're going to be so disconnected from humanity and so connected to these fictional characters that's all that's going to drive them. Like, she could have watched that episode after she went and got all the human beings she knows.
For real.
But she didn't. She's just like, I gotta see this right now.
Yeah, this is what I've been waiting for this whole time.
So I feel like it was a very specific message of like, we have destroyed the youth in a way that is going to destroy us. And unless we fix that, there is no hope. That's the message that I took away from it.
Wow. It's a lot on that final scene.
I know. What do you think?
I didn't. I was like, this is how they're ending this? She's going to watch Friends? So, I mean, they left everything else unresolved. Yeah. Like, her story of, I will have to watch Friends is resolved. Everybody else is left hanging. They haven't found her. Their son is potentially dying of this.
His teeth have all fallen.
Yeah, this sort of radiation poisoning. Mm-hmm. The attack is still going on. They see nuclear explosions in the city.
Not only that, but Ethan Hawke and Mahershala Ali have gone off to like try to talk to Kevin Bacon.
Right, because everybody knows Kevin Bacon.
Because clearly that was Kevin Bacon playing Kevin Bacon at the end of the world. No, they go off to talk to like the prepper of in town, right? The guy who's like ready for anything. Clearly not the only one who's ready for anything, but the guy that everyone knows is ready for anything. And they set a timer. So the daughter doesn't want the dad to leave. He's like, I got to go do this. We're going to set a timer. I will be back by the time the timer goes off.
Yeah.
So when the timer goes off, the two guys are trying to get drugs to save the son.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like trying to figure out how, and they're seeing that what I think is a very realistic thing, that there are going to be people out there who have the things and are like, nope, you should have had the things.
Yeah.
These are my things. I'm going to shoot you if you don't leave. So they're off doing that. And the Karen lady and the daughter have gone out to the shed. I don't remember why they went out to the shed, but they went out to the shed. They had the weird experience with the deer.
Mm-hmm. Well, they were on their way trying to find the daughter.
Oh, right. So they're out in the shed. They have the weird experience with the deer. They do a little bonding because they are like united against the deer.
Yes.
Which is interesting. But then the timer, the daughter's watch goes off as they are looking through like a space between the trees, and they are seeing like the mushroom cloud over the city.
Yeah.
I loved that in this movie, they were like, Mom was on a plane when this all happened. We don't know what happened to her. We never find out.
No.
They never find out. That's so realistic.
Because that's what the movie's about, is not finding out what's going on.
There would be no way. And in so many movies, they would have like forced a way.
Mm-hmm.
There would be no way. So they never find out. And then also this ending where they're all separated and they're trying to do the things, but like, I did not have hope for these people at the end of the movie.
No, they found a bunker.
The little girl found the bunker and then didn't tell anybody about it.
Friends is only half an hour.
No, I do think that it is possible, but
the finale might be an hour.
Right. I think that it's also possible, though, that she'd be like, all right, well, now I'm going to start watching it all over again. Or I'm going to start watching something else. Or, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was not a hopeful ending in the sense of, like, we didn't learn anything.
No.
We don't know what happened. We're all separated. This world is too much for us to tackle individually or even in pairs.
Again, the theme.
Yes.
Work together.
Yes.
Don't just watch Friends.
This is why I really am glad that I know a lot of people who are good at things.
Unlike us.
Because we're not good at things. And I feel like hopefully the people that I know who are good at things know that we are decent people who will...
We're fun to have around. We do a podcast.
Right? We
can do it live when the world ends. We'll be like, I remember seeing this movie once back when there were movies.
Make things up about movies and shows. No, like I do often think like, hopefully the people I know who are good at things and will survive in a post-apocalyptic world understand that I am perfectly willing to like do whatever hard chores there are, and I will take orders if it means that they will share their garden with me, because I can't keep a garden alive. Yeah. I will starve to death.
True.
Do you hear that, Alex? I'm talking to you, Alex. I'm counting on you to keep us alive. I'll haul all the water you want.
Okay.
Ratings.
I enjoyed this movie. It was long and it kind of felt long, but I mean, there was stuff going on. And the big thing for me with this movie was this very Lovecraftian cosmic horror feel of mystery abounds in the universe and you can't solve it and it's coming to get you from every direction. And that's how the whole movie felt, was this oppressive feeling of tension and what is happening. And that was fun. For that to work, it has to be explained in the end. And they gave us an explanation. We still don't actually know it's true, but the presence of nuclear explosions definitely indicates some sort of attack, warfare. I was bothered by the supernatural feel of it all when it turns out it wasn't. But also, I can see how that, that builds the mystery, especially if you can then offer some sort of real world explanation for it. Then, hey, that felt real creepy and weird, but it turns out it was this. That works. I didn't love it, though. And again, I mentioned my problem with reality and fantasy mixing without giving me warning. Very, very concerning. I feel like they could have kept it more in the weird fantastical realm from the beginning, or like I think some of the more fantastical things like the airplane crash on the beach, stuff like that, I'm not sure they were meant to be fantastical. I think they just went over the top in creating it, and they thought that's how reality is, but no, that's how movies are. You needed to be more grounded than that, and that kind of bothered me. But I still enjoyed it, and I could, suspend my reality accepting powers. So I would like to call this I really liked it in a way. 4.5 cups of coffee out of 5. It was just a little bit missing, but just kind of, it was doing something.
It was definitely doing something. I would put this movie in the same category as Don't Look Up. Not because they're similar movies, really, but because there's like this political apocalypse. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's the genre. And I am a fan of the political apocalypse genre. Okay. Like the very modern, edging into futuristic political apocalypse. It's very specifically connected to the major political issues of the time. And it feels different. Like I know that Don't Look Up is about climate change, right? Like that's a very specific thing. That's very environmental. That should feel like an environmental horror, but it doesn't. It feels like political horror.
Yeah, because it's about not listening to experts and all that.
And this feels like that too, in that this is a like World War kind of horror, but the real message of it is not so much about what's actually happening out in the world, but how did we get there? How did it happen? Why did it happen? And I am very, very intrigued by this genre of movie.
Sure.
I was not anywhere near as bothered by the combination of realism and hyper-realism or surrealism.
Yeah.
I felt, and I disagree with you.
Stop.
I know. No, you said you didn't think it was intentional. You thought that they just did it and it became that. They overdid it.
Yeah, like
I think they
thought
did it.
That was not fantastical.
No, I think it was very intentional. I think that they knew what they were doing. They were making that choice of like, we're not showing these things, and then bam, suddenly we're showing these things, and that there was some reason. I mean, your
idea about the tunnel vision was clever. I do want to put in the contrast of the oil tanker scene is a big fantastical moment where this oil tanker crashes onto the beach that completely fits into the realm of reality. Like, legit cool. You've shown me something massive and crazy and fantastical that is real. Mm-hmm. And I was down with that. Then the airplane one was ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, it was different points in the story. Mm-hmm. They hadn't been dealing with chaos for 24 hours straight before that happened. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. And maybe there wasn't intention there, but it felt intentional to me. Yeah. I did not realize until we stopped to like feed the cats or something partway through. I didn't even realize that the movie was a long movie because I was so enthralled with it the whole time. So I feel like that speaks really well of it. And I loved the nuances that all of these actors were bringing to the characters that they had. Like, I felt like I could understand each of these people and kind of how they felt about the situation and whether they were concerned or not concerned and whether they felt like they could show their concern or not.
And the awkwardness of their interactions with new people.
Yes. And I really thought they all did a really, really great job. So I also want to mention that, you watch movies and you tend to try to find who you think you are, the character you are in this movie. And I think that this movie may be difficult for white women to watch.
Yeah.
Because the Julia Roberts character is not a great person.
No.
And she's not a terrible person by any means. She was very realistic and I was upset by how much I could relate to her. And upset, not like this is bad, but like, oof, I need to examine some things. Mm-hmm. Because she was overworked, she felt overly responsible for all kinds of things. She needed to take this break, and then in the middle of this break, all hell breaks loose. And she's scared and she's angry And at one point she even says, I don't want to be angry all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, right. Yeah. And it was a thing for me. Like, I was watching this and I really was thinking about my tendency to respond to stress by being angry, and like where that comes from and what that is as a cultural thing that I am allowed to do in a way that other people are not allowed to do. And it was very interesting to be watching this movie and like relating most to someone that I didn't really like or have a lot of respect for.
Yeah.
And I mean, I liked she realized some of the things that she was doing, and she tried to, you know, make amends and whatever, but she still wasn't a great person in a lot of ways. And that was difficult. And I feel like there are many people who would find it even more difficult, and to the point where they'd be like, this movie is bad and wrong and that was a terrible character and people don't act like that. And
Yeah,
I'd be like, yeah, we do. So I just wanted to point that piece out. I think that makes it that much more important for white women to watch this movie and like pay attention to that. But, you know. All of that being said, I think I am going to give this movie 5 coffee cups out of 5.
I thought you would.
I really liked it, and I think it has some very interesting messaging, and I think it is going to be underappreciated for what it was because it has too much truth in it. Honestly, I think there's too much truth. It's going to make people uncomfortable.
Yeah, fair. Well, that podcast was about as long as the movie was.
There were so many interesting things to say.
I thought of some others a minute ago, but I'm not going to say
interesting,
them.
But
they were about interesting things. We're not interesting.
Okay.
So we'll see you all next week because we got to get out of here. That was ridiculously long. I'm sorry.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
You're sinking.
I'm sinking. It's a slow fall.
You're getting shorter and shorter.